This is Dave Fink from jazzcapacitor.com, and I've created this video to demonstrate what I like to do with all the music that I've transcribed. Now, aside from learning the transcription and playing along with the original recording, I also find it useful to take certain ideas from some of my favorite players and apply those ideas to whatever song it is I'm currently working on. For example, I might take like a one-measure walking pattern, think about where and how I can use that pattern within the context of a song, and from there establish that idea as either a point of destination or a point of departure as I explore and experiment with the various options that I'm hearing in getting my bass line from point A to point B within the chord progression of that song. So throughout this video, I will briefly discuss the various ideas that I've taken from some of my favorite bass players and how I apply those ideas to a song called Stablemates, written by Benny Golson. The first set of ideas that I've chosen to use come from bassist Christian McBride on a song called Too Close for Comfort that he recorded on his first album, Getting To It. These bass lines are going to work really well on Stablemates because, first of all, both songs are in the exact same key signature, the key of D flat major. And second, both songs share a similar chord progression. They both have this 2-bar phrase that starts with a D flat major 7 chord followed by a C7 sharp 5, or C augmented. Now let's hear what these patterns sound like. This is the first example taken from McBride's bass line on Too Close for Comfort, which has a nice contour with a descending bass line in the first measure followed by an ascending line in the bar after. This second pattern fits over the same chord progression on this 2-bar phrase. Okay, this third idea has got this tritone thing going on, and these walk-in lines are going to work pretty well over a minor chord or even a dominant 7 chord. Alright, the last thing that I'm going to take from this recording is the tempo. First of all, this tempo is really in the pocket, and it's going to sound good on Stablemates. And second, it's good to have a specific tempo in mind when choosing which patterns you want to practice or try to apply to a song. It's just like when you're composing. You want to have a very specific tempo in mind because all the ideas that you're hearing and working out, you want them to be consistent with each other. So I'm hearing this around 184-ish. Quarter note equals 184 beats per minute. That's in the pocket. The next set of examples that I've chosen to use for my bass line come from bassist Paul Chambers. The first is from a recording that he did with Miles Davis on a song called Love for Sale, and it's a walking pattern over a 2-5-1 chord progression that just so happens to be in the key of D flat major. The second idea that I've taken from Paul Chambers is sort of a blues, folk-like lick that I've heard him play a lot, and this is from his solo on a song called A Foggy Day with the Red Garland Trio. The next idea that I wanted to include in my bass line is a concept that I've taken from the great bassist Ron Carter, and this concept is what's known as enclosure. The concept of enclosure is where the note of importance, which is generally a chord tone, is enclosed from a note that's a half step above it and a half step below it. So in this example here, we have an enclosed third. So our note of importance is the third of the B flat 7 chord, which is D. Now we're going to enclose that note by approaching it from a half step above, which is the E flat, that goes to a C sharp, which is a half step below, and finally resolves at the note of importance, D. And this is what it sounds like. Here are a few excerpts of Ron Carter playing this concept of enclosure in his walking bass lines. The next idea that I wanted to use is a lick that I really dig, and I've heard him do it a lot. This comes from the great bassist Charles Mingus. Now, I'm probably going to alter this lick a little bit to fit a certain chord in the song Stablemates, and I've already got a few ideas of where I can use this. But here's what the lick sounds like. Now I'm going to draw on some inspiration from the great bassist Charlie Haden. And these first few ideas that I've taken come from a recording that he did with John Coltrane on an Ornette Coleman song called The Blessing. What I've noticed about Charlie Haden's playing, especially during this time period with Ornette Coleman in the early 1960s, is that his bass line at times will focus on a specific interval. For example, he might play the interval of a perfect fourth for 3 or 4 beats in one measure, and then be like, hey, I kind of dig that, I'm going to carry that over to the next bar. Or he'll just play fourths in one measure, and then 2 or 3 bars later do the same thing. So it's sort of a melodic sequence, but whatever you want to call it, it's definitely focused on a very specific interval. So in this first example, Haden is focused on the interval of a third, and to be more specific, it's a descending minor third. This second excerpt shows how Haden is focused on the interval of a perfect fourth. These next 2 examples are from a song called Motive for Its Use that Charlie Haden recorded with Ornette Coleman. And these excerpts are a good example of how Charlie Haden will focus on a melodic shape in his walking bass line. And this first example is just a simple 3-note pattern that he transposes down by a perfect fourth. This second example is just a simple 4-note pattern that Haden transposes in stepwise motion through an A-flat major scale, starting on the 7th. So this idea of focusing on a melodic shape, or a simple 3 to 4 note pattern, and sort of navigating it through chord changes is something that just about every great bass player does. Here's an example of Doug Watkins' bass line from a blues called Red's Head, where he's focused on a simple 3-note pattern, which is a chromatic line that he repeats 3 times. Alright, the last idea that I'm going to use for my bass line on Stablemates is going to work really well as a melodic sequence in the last 4 measures of the bridge. Here we've got these 4 chords of the same sonority, a dominant 7, that are descending by a half step. So in a chord progression like this, it's good to have a bass line that will distinguish these 4 chords of the same sonority apart from each other. And having a melodic sequence in your line is going to help do that. But I'm not going to use the exact same line for all 4 measures because that's just way too obvious. So I'll find another pattern and alternate between the 2. Here is Ray Brown playing a common bass line used by many bass players for a melodic sequence. So now I'm going to play the bass line that I've worked out for 2 choruses on Stablemates, and I've marked the patterns, licks, and concepts that I've just discussed so you can see how I have applied all these ideas. I've also included the melody because that is definitely something that I think about when trying to find what notes are going to sound good in my bass line.